All right, guys. We are now joined by constitutional law professor Caroline Mala Corbin. She's a frequent guest and contributor here at Higher Learning, and anytime we have her on, that means that there is great news. No! That means that as much as we like talking to her, when we see her, we have deep questions about the state of the United States of America as it relates to the Constitution. And obviously, as lighthearted as I'm being right now, we have reached the point that Professor Corbin said we're going to reach, where we are, as you put it, fucked. I have a lot of questions about what this means, but before we get to our questions, I'm sure Rachel does too. Tell us what this means to you.
The Supreme Court decision is like a nightmare I cannot wake up from. It's just so appalling as a woman who believes in women's equality and as a constitutional law professor who believes in the rule of law. There is nothing good about this decision.
When you say there's nothing good, I'm assuming you're not just talking about the decision, but the trickle-down effect that this decision will have in our country, right?
I mean, just focusing on the consequences. The Supreme Court has said that the U.S. Constitution does not protect a woman's right to end an unwanted pregnancy. This means that states now have the power to force women to go through pregnancy. This is a denial of the absolute most basic autonomy. Women cannot even control what happens to their body. And if they can't control what happens to their body, they cannot control what happens to their life. And this is the immediate consequence.
So when you said, as someone who believes in the rule of law, this decision troubles you. For people who don't know, who are watching this, who are not as well versed in the Constitution as you are, why do you feel like this decision flies in the face of the rule of law?
So the Supreme Court can and has overruled precedent, and sometimes it should. But there are rules for when it's appropriate. And the Supreme Court completely ignored those rules. And so its determination is not based on legal principles, but on political outcomes. They did not offer a single persuasive justification under the existing rules for when it's appropriate to overrule prior cases. And so it really looks like they're just using their power to get what they want instead of reasoning based on existing law.
Do you think this will change the way decisions are made in the Supreme Court? Based on the reasoning you just gave, is this a telling sign of they're going to do things based on what their morals, politics, rather than actually following or doing things within the confines of the law, or precedent, I should say?
I think it shows a real willingness to eliminate and overrule cases they don't like, merely because they now have the votes to do so. And I think there was another decision today where they did exactly that. And so school prayer has long been considered to violate the establishment clause. The government's not supposed to pray in school. And the Supreme Court just overruled precedent in a way and said, no, in this particular case, it's just fine. So the answer to your question is, do I think the court will continue along a path of remaking the law to fit its particular worldview rather than relying on legal principles? Yes. I think it will, and it already has.
Last question on the Supreme Court for me, and then I'll get to where we go from here. Is this Supreme Court to you illegitimate?
I think that public opinion of the Supreme Court is at a real low, and I think its legitimacy really is put into question when people think it is driven by political calculations and their own preferred view rather than based on principle. So it's not just me who's questioning their legitimacy. I think it's large swaths of the American people. And it's a really important institution in our democracy, and it's a shame that people no longer respect it.
Here's my last question on the Supreme Court, or in regards to this. The concurring opinion from Clarence Thomas. He was the only one to sign it. But how seriously should we take what he said in that opinion, even though he was the lone wolf now? What do you think that means? And is this something we should dismiss or really pay attention to?
I think you don't even need to look at Justice Thomas's concurrence, where he basically says, I think not only this fundamental right isn't found in the Constitution, I think there's a whole list of fundamental rights that are not found in the Constitution, and we should be overruling all kinds of cases. The court's own reasoning provides a blueprint for eliminating further rights. Because what it argued is the only fundamental rights that we have are either those that are explicitly listed and named in the Constitution, or rights that are deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions. So if the people in the 18th century didn't give us these rights, then we don't have them today. And that approach to fundamental rights is not only absurd, like why are we basing our rights today on the racist, sexist, homophobic views of people in the 19th century, right? That approach is not only absurd, but it precludes most of the rights we think really are important. Because frankly, the right to contraception is, according to this Supreme Court's view of history, probably not deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition. The right to same-sex marriage, that's definitely not deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition. So our whole approach to fundamental rights is a really narrow, cramped, miserly approach. And it means that that means that they can now, under their reasoning, eliminate many things that we consider essential to be autonomous, equal people in this country.
So let's turn our attention to the White House now. The right has won this portion of the battle. They've waged a 50-year war on Roe, and they have claimed victory. What is within the powers of the president to do right now to combat this? I've heard a couple of different things. I've heard the using federal lands for abortion services. I know that the Hyde Amendment somewhat precludes that. How do you get around Hyde in order to do that?
Yeah, so the one thing it can't do, the Supreme Court's decision that the abortion is not protected by the U.S. Constitution means that we can no longer turn to the federal Constitution. Maybe we can do something with federal law. So if it's federal law, it's not up to the president, it's up to Congress. So Congress would need to pass a law protecting reproductive rights. And Congress includes both the House, which has already acted, but also the Senate, which refuses to do anything about reproductive rights. So I'm not optimistic about a federal law. What can the president do via executive order? He could, like the FDA, maybe can make it easier to get the abortion pill, because abortion can be done both surgically and via medicine. But it's not altogether clear how much the president alone can do. Someone suggested, I've had some colleagues, I have colleagues trying to come up with all kinds of creative suggestions, maybe establishing abortion clinics on federal property.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, anything it does will be subject to challenge. And ultimately, whether they have the authority or not to do such things is going to go before the same Supreme Court who really is hostile to abortion. So it's worth trying. And you might have just gotten me on a particularly pessimistic day, but as you know, I'm generally pessimistic. There are certainly some things worth trying, but I don't know what will succeed.
That's what I was going to ask you is, so there are options, but how likely is it that these options actually are established?
I don't know, and frankly, I'm not an expert. I can't see the future. I'm not an expert on politics, right? Because part of it is political will, and part of it is whether the courts will allow it. And we have capture by conservatives in our federal government, and we have a lot of very conservative judges in our federal courts right now. So I certainly think it's worth trying everything we can. But I don't know at the federal level what's going to succeed. I think there's going to be, I think a better path maybe at the local level, meaning at the state level. Because at least at this point, it will now be up to the states. And so the more states that provide protection for abortion access, the more places in the country where it's available, which of course helps some women. It will help women with means, but those women who don't have the money to take off work and find child support and make reservations, which are often women of color, poor women, abortion is not going to be available to them. It's not going to be available. So either they will have children that they don't want or can't afford, or they're going to look for extra legal means to end their abortion in their state. So
then what about the idea of packing the court to neutralize the rights hold on the judiciary?
Right. So again, once the Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution, its view of the Constitution is the final word. So we cannot, the only people who can overrule the Supreme Court's decision is the Supreme Court, unless we amend the Constitution. I should say there are two paths to overruling this decision. One is to amend our Constitution, and the other is have a different Supreme Court that comes to a different conclusion. And so what you're suggesting is, well, maybe we can expand the court and fill it with people who are not so hostile to abortion that they're willing to distort the law to get the ends they want. Nothing in this Constitution dictates the number of people that are on the Supreme Court. So it is certainly possible to increase the number of people on the court. Again, I don't see that happening at this time.
Are for the other rights we think that are going to be challenged, very in the near future, and this court is going to hear, are there cases like on the horizon already ready, like ripe? Like we knew this Mississippi case was going to be the one that the Supreme Court was hearing. Are there other cases that are there challenging contraception or same-sex marriage that the Supreme Court could hear very, very soon?
That is, I am not aware of any particular cases that are already teed up to address those particular issues. But I haven't actually specifically looked at that question. So maybe there are some, and I just don't know them yet. I just may not know them.
Why you said that you don't see packing the court as a viable option here. I'm just politically understand that he's
politically, constitutionally, it is absolutely.
Why do you think politically?
Option.
Why do you think politically?
Politically, I don't think the president has expressed interest in doing that. And again, you need to have a Congress that can enact a law that does it. And with the filibuster in place, there are not. If we can't even pass a law to protect abortion, which I think is much less of a reach for Congress, given that the vast majority of people in America actually were opposed to overruling Roe v. Wade. If there's not political will to do that minimal action, I don't think there's the political will to take the more drastic action of reconfiguring the court.
So
we don't have there's not the votes, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. So where is the disconnect on this and on some of this other stuff between the American public? I've watched really smart people. Ellie Mistel was on Tiffany Cross's show, and he said that you could get around Hyde by handing out abortion pills at the post office. You could federalize. You could call into to use federal lands all over the place. People are calling for the packing of the court. I see people bringing up the fact that FDR in 1937 threatened the Supreme Court with expanding the court after they threatened Social Security, as part of, obviously he changed the world, the New Deal and all of that stuff, or at least changed the country. Where are we the victims of misinformation, or people emotional and just spouting off, or none of these things viable options? Is the White House powerless here?
Again, many of these require an act of Congress. And an act of Congress means you need to have 60 people in the Senate on board.
Yeah.
And we don't have 60 people on board. And you might say, the Senate does not represent the people of America. And you would be right, given that many very small states have the same representation as states like New York and California, which have, many, many times people in their state. And that's the structure of our government right now. And it can change. We have midterms coming up. So vote.
Oh, Caroline,
you're gonna who represent your views.
Caroline, you're gonna piss so many people off. You're gonna piss so many people off if you tell us to go vote, man.
I know. I'm sorry. The voter suppression. I know. We can have a whole other show on voter suppression.
Caroline, as a law professor, talking to your constitutional law students, what do you say? I mean, it's so grim. I mean, you're teaching them about the Constitution, and the Supreme Court seems to be playing with it and interpreting it in a way that's not right. I mean, what do you say to your students as they come into your classroom? And I mean, it's the summer now, but
Yeah. I mean, in the past, I have always tried to highlight how the court has offered reasons for its decisions, and sometimes those reasons are persuasive and sometimes they are not. I have always emphasized, though, that the court, like any other branch, is about power. Who has the power and who's in control and who doesn't, and how these decisions often reinscribe the power of those who already have it and perpetuate the powerlessness of those who don't have it. And that is part of our constitutional legacy as well. But the advantage of teaching law students is that these are the people who are going to go out into the world and make the laws. And these are the students who are going to become the judges. So hopefully a better understanding of what's at stake might temper their own engagement with the law.
Okay, from last question for me, and we really appreciate you joining us on.
I'm sorry, I should have come with a list of like, here are things that could happen, right?
No, you're.
I'm not saying.
No.
I'm feeling optimistic about it. So one thing I do want to say, I do want to say this though. We are never going to return to the era of back alley coat hanger abortions. That is not our future. And that is not our future because our medical landscape has changed. Because now we have available, which we did not have available the last time abortion wasn't protected, is we have the ability to end a pregnancy by medicine. And so there are going to be networks created to get the pills to women one way or another. And so I think the strongest possible, the best approach, and I don't know whether it's going to be federal government doing something with the FDA saying you can't ban these pills, or whether it's going to be states that make it really easy to get the medicine in their state, or whether it's going to be networks of people who have, states where it's legal, mail to people who are then going to mail it to other women in states where it's banned. It's going to be available one way or another somehow. I don't know how easily via medical abortion. So I'm trying to find something to leave people with. So that's going to be an option. Maybe extra legal, but it'll be there. Okay, go ahead.
Well, that leads me actually to two questions. Number one, have the Democrats, or not? Let me not say the Democrats. Let me say the pro-choice wing of American politics. Have they passed and punted on opportunities to codify Roe in the last 50 years? You hear this common refrain that there were chances to codify Roe, and these chances were either missed or not prioritized by the pro-choice arm of American politics in the last 50 years. How true is that? Second part to that question is, from a legal and constitutional standpoint, what's the best way for us to move forward now that this attack has happened and been successful?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think maybe I don't know if the votes were there to codify it, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm more of a constitutional law professor than a political scientist, and so again, I can't answer that with confidence. It may be that there was an opportunity, and there may have been other priorities, or they may have been a missed opportunity. honestly, I'm not sure. I will say that I don't think until really recently anyone believed that the court would actually overrule Roe. And frankly, if Obama had been able to appoint a justice as he was supposed to, it would not have been overruled. I mean, this is really, the court's decision is really a tremendously radical departure. And usually the Supreme Court works incrementally, if it works at all. So it's hard to explain how much of an outlier this kind of decision is. And I think that's not really an answer.
No. It absolutely is, because
it's just shocking how willing they are to jettison not only prior law, but the precedent on precedent, right? It's ignoring precedent on two levels. It's ignoring precedent on the actual substantive rules about abortion, and it's ignoring precedent about the rules for how you treat precedent. And I forgot the second question.
The second question is from a legal and constitutional.
What can we do constitutionally?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta vote, right?
Again, I think some of the work would be at the state level and to go from there. I mean, same-sex marriage also had major setbacks at the Supreme Court level, and they then switched their focus to the states, and then gradually they created more support. But no, I don't even know if that analogy works, because there already is some support.
Yeah.
So I got nothing. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean,
nobody knows anything except for the fact that
I don't have answers.
Nobody. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Before we let you go, you had tweeted out that we kind of need to brace ourselves because there are there's still, I think, 7 set decisions and with one coming down today in regards to prayer in school. What are the other topics that we need to brace ourselves for? Because obviously Roe v. Wade is something we were paying attention to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is it. Well, the day before, the Supreme Court expanded Second Amendment rights even more.
Right.
In a way, I think, again, and like, not only do you have a right to defend yourself in the home, but now you have a right to walk around with a gun anywhere. And the only regulation they're going to accept are regulations that existed in history. So again, the Supreme Court is interpreting our Constitution in a way that only allows what existed in the past, which is an appalling approach to constitutional interpretation. So normally when a constitutional right is infringed, the government might still be able to regulate if it has a really compelling government interest. And so for like guns, the compelling interest is not having people dying in mass shootings every other day. But the court was like, that's irrelevant when it comes to your right to have a gun. The only thing that matters is, was there a regulation like the one you want to oppose that existed in history? And if it doesn't matter if this regulation is going to save lives. We don't care. We only care if the regulation is like a regulation that existed in history. So that's another tremendous blow that's going to have terrible repercussions. The case today about prayer in school, is completely dismissive of students who are religious minorities in school. There's another case coming down about the environment, about the EPA's authority to regulate in the interests of the environment. That too, they may severely cut back at that. And those are just cases that I'm aware of. There's a whole host of other criminal cases that I don't follow as closely. But this activist conservative court is remaking our Constitution in ways that cares almost nothing about less powerful people.
Impeach them all.
Care. It does
Impeach
not
them.
care.
Impeach them. They lied during their confirmation
And
hearings.
don't even get me
Impeach them.
started about the factual distortions in the cases.
Yeah.
And the distortion of the factual record, the distortion of science. It's just really heartbreaking. And they've broken me. I don't know.
Impeach them.
I have to regroup because we have to think about the future, and we will. But right now, again, this is a conservative activist court remaking constitutional law in its own image, and there are going to be a lot of people hurt along the way.
Caroline Mala Corbin, thank you for joining us today on Higher Learning. We realize that it is not a fantastic time, but your insight and your knowledge is always appreciated. Thank you so much.
It's always nice to talk to you, and maybe one day I'll come on your show and talk about a fabulous development in the law.
An amazing victory.
We hope so too.
That's what we hope. An amazing victory. Okay, thank you. And we'll see you later.